And we're live. Greetings and salutations, my beloved passionate newcomers, visitors, and guests. Welcome to another episode of the Passion PSA podcast, where I passion no last necessary, your Get You Right Guru, issue a weekly public service announcement about whatever I have observed or was on my mind. This is a for your consideration zone where the objective is to offer you a perspective you may not, I'm over here kicking stuff, you may not have previously considered, to aid you in becoming a better version of yourself, for yourself and for others, as well as to expand your thinking. This is a safe space, but not necessarily a delicate one. I will never rob you of your right to feel what you feel, regardless to what I may say. Same way, I will not sugarcoat the truth. The goal is to get you to higher, more expanded thinking. We got a guest today, y'all, and I'm really, really excited. And I'm going to give you a brief rundown because his bio is super long. But that's because he has a wealth of accomplishments. I'm really proud of him, and I'm really grateful to have him in the space this week. So we're going to get into our affirmations. And then after we've completed our affirmations, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our guest. And then I'm going to tell you why our guest is here. And then we're going to get straight into it. So if you are new here, we do start every episode with affirmations just to set the tone, to raise the vibration, and to ensure that we are all vibrating on the same frequency. I might say some things that rub you the wrong way, and that's okay. Feel how you feel, okay? But we want to make sure that we're starting as high as possible so that if I make you feel a way, you don't feel like you want to throw me in the garbage. You just feel like you don't want to talk to me for the rest of the week, okay? All right. So if you're ready, take a deep breath and repeat after me. If you would like, you can also say your own affirmations at this time. Are you ready, sir?
I'm ready.
Okay. I am prepared for the next steps. Bro, you finna repeat after me or not?
Oh, love that. Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. Oh, man, and I'm not editing that out because that was priceless. That was everything. Okay, we're ready.
All right.
I am prepared for the next steps.
I am prepared for the next steps.
I am in control of my experience.
I am in control of my experience.
I arm myself with the proper tools.
I arm myself with the proper tools.
I heed sage wisdom.
I heed sage wisdom.
I take excellent notes and execute expeditiously.
I take excellent notes and execute expeditiously.
I take advantage of the advantage.
I take advantage of the advantage.
My name is being spoken in the room.
My name is being spoken in the room.
The ball is in my court.
The ball is in my court.
The odds are in my favor.
The odds are in my favor.
I am winning.
I am winning.
I am grateful.
I am grateful.
Ashe, ashe, ashe.
Ashe, ashe. Wow.
Now you see why I was smiling before?
Yeah, it was powerful. Very powerful. I love it.
A lot of people don't really fully grasp the point of affirmation, and some people don't necessarily do it on their own. But it really sets a tone, and just to speak these words over yourself, over your life, over your situation, you are really putting the power in the direction you need it to go in. And so many of us are so comfortable in speaking in negatives and saying, oh, I was just kidding, or I didn't mean anything by it. And that's not how you set the tone for yourself. Like, you took it as a joke, but your subconscious mind did not. And so when those things become manifest, then you're upset with everyone but yourself, when this is the foundation that you laid. So if you lay a foundation of positivity before whatever it is that you're trying to build on that foundation, you have every right to expect nothing but positive, because that's what you laid your foundation on. So, y'all,
Wow.
Today we have with us Gerrick Hilliard Jr. This is one of my relatives. This is one of my cousins. Okay. But that's not why he's on the show. All right. There ain't no nepotism here. He's on the show because he got something to offer. Now, for the last few weeks, as I told you, I have been keeping my foot on everybody's neck, and that includes my own. And the reason why is because we want to make sure that we're going higher every opportunity that we can. We want to make sure that we are doing the work within ourselves. It's great to say, I want to be a millionaire. It's great to come up on $1 million. But if you don't have a millionaire mindset to go along with it, if you don't have proper skills to be able to navigate people and to be able to navigate really treacherous sometimes situations, you can squander that money. You could misspend, you can misuse, you can do a lot of things, right? So objectively, we want to make sure that we're doing the work within so that we know how to navigate the rest of the people who haven't done the work. Amen, saints. So this week, Gerrick came on because the last week we did Showing Up for Yourself. The week before that, we did the follow-up to Decisions, and that was about how our decisions impact others. The week before that, we were talking about the decisions that we're making, right? And we started off this particular season with, what was it? What was the title of it? Things Are Not Always What They Seem, right? Today, we're going to talk about another way that you can show up for yourself. A lot of the people that I have spoken to recently are looking for work. And a lot of people have been having a very, very challenging time finding work. And these are people who are multi-degreed. These are people who have decades of experience in their respective fields. They're finding a lot of challenge trying to find a job, regardless to whether it's work from home or to go in office. They're finding challenges finding a position. They're finding a challenge finding a position that goes along with their qualifications. They're either overqualified or there's something else at play. And a lot of people are panicking. They're getting nervous. And then every day you turn on the news or you turn on your social media, somebody's saying, recession, everybody going to be poor, everybody going to be broke, everybody going to struggle. None of that is edifying. None of that is going to make you feel good about what you have going on. So what we want to do is we want to talk to you a little bit from Gerrick's perspective. And like I said, Gerrick has a very, very detailed resume, and he has a broad spectrum background. So he's not only been an employee, he's been an employer, he's been corporate, he's been entrepreneur. So from that perspective, we're going to talk a little bit about how you can adequately arm yourself, prepare yourself to go out and apply for jobs, present yourself so that you are the candidate of choice. It's great to be a candidate, but we want to be the candidate of choice. If there's going to be 20 people in the pool, we want to be at least in the 5 that got fished out. And out of the 5 that got fished out, we want to be the 2 that they're really trying to whittle it down to. So, and ultimately the one that they pick, right? So, good afternoon, Gerrick. How are you today?
I'm doing pretty well. Yourself?
I'm fantastic. I'm grateful to have you in this space. I appreciate you. I appreciate your setup. It's good. It's good. Background, all of it. I love it. I'm here for it. I want to tell the people a little bit about you because there's so much to tell. Gerrick is multi-degreed, right? So we'll start there. He has his bachelor's in business management. He has his master of business administration. He's also attained his certified supply chain professional certification, 1 and 2. So I do have questions about that because I don't know what that means. And we know what it means to have degrees, but I want you to talk to us a little bit about those particular certifications. So put a bookmark there. Okay. And then for Gerrick's work experience, Gerrick has worked globally, right? So he has worked in South America in inside sales for a company where he was selling tech software. And then he started working for a transportation logistics company. And then he switched over to supply chain, working for Wix Filters. Y'all don't know what any of this means, but Gerrick is going to explain it to you, okay? Don't shame me. Okay. He participated, because I don't want to be that person. You know those people, like, they introduce you and they read it so eloquently, but they don't know. I don't want to be that person. I just want to keep it real. They read it like they know what they're talking about. They don't know what they're talking about. They're like, oh, this sounds really, this sounds good. Bruh, you're going to have to explain this. So anyway, He participated in coordinating directors and VPs, documentation, and other necessary articles shortly after the announced acquisition of Wix Filters by Manhummel. And then he started working in purchasing. Okay, I like that. He started working in purchasing as a materials buyer in 2016 and started to understand the good, bad, and ugly of company restructurings, which re-sparked his interest in career development, resumes, and upskilling. That's why he's here. Okay. He relocated to Virginia Beach, and we have a company in common because I think I've told you before, I used to work for Family Dollar, and he was also working in Family Dollar, not in the store though. He was hired. I was the store manager.
No, that's good.
Let me see. 2019 to work for Family Dollar. Yes, and that was so wild when they were acquired by Dollar Tree. Because for so long everybody like assumed that they were kind of one in the same company, and they not until they were. And then there was a lifestyle change. So he had my baby cousin. She's so sweet.
Oh yeah.
She gets nap time right now, and I get this knot squeezing in my head under my hat, but we ain't gonna talk about that. We're just gonna move past that. After his lifestyle change, he went to work for Rostar Filters, and then that's where he became he was working as a supply chain specialist, and then he's continued to move on in entrepreneurship. He co-founded Tab Vending Solutions. He left there, but he still does assist from time to time with the remaining partners. He also assisted partners in acquiring an account in one of the charter schools. So Gerrick has done a lot. I'm not going to sit here and read this whole biography to you because that's not what we're here for. We want to talk to the man since we have him, the man, the myth, and the legend. So talk to us, Gerrick. Tell us about the certifications. Let's start there.
Okay. So first of all, thank you for having me. I know it's been tough trying to coordinate schedules, but I'm grateful we're here. And wow, what a time to have this conversation, right?
Indeed.
So in terms of certifications, so the first one that you had mentioned, the certified supply chain professional. So when you start, and I guess I'll kind of go back a little bit, and this is going to be part of like some of the tips I'll talk about later on, but when you start working in a certain field or industry, there are certain vectors or paths that you can go, because there's certain skills that are expected of you if you want to move up. And so as I started to learn more and more about purchasing, I had the privilege to work with senior buyers, directors who said, hey, if this is a field that you're interested in and you want to continue on, here are some associations that offer these type of certifications, and through that you'll learn different skills. So the first one, the supply management or supply chain professional, that skill, that really covers the gamut of just really what is supply chain, it goes from everything from, scheduling deliveries and shipments. And this was really great at the time because when I was working at Rostar as a supply chain specialist, I was like coordinating deliveries with containers at the docks. And since the port, or where I was coordinating shipments from, was the LA port, that involved a lot of coordination. There were a lot of supply chain gaps, and maybe get into that maybe a little bit later if it's relevant. But there was a gamut of skills and just bodies of knowledge, frankly, that were helpful for me to understand. And so that getting that stamp and mark of approval, it's kind of just a short heuristic of saying, okay, he's in order to get the certification, you have to be in the industry for a certain amount of time. You have to have a certain level of education. So all of that to say that first certification pretty much lets you know that, okay, he at least has the bare understanding of supply chain. The second certification, the Certified Professional Supply Management Manager certification. So that, yeah, CPSM. So that is a very rigorous certification. You have to take 3 exams. You have to have been in the field 3 years, I think, if you have your bachelor's. If you don't, then 5. So that is really like essentially any purchaser who is going to manage a critical item, having that stamp of approval, you're going to get noticed. So again, I know I'm kind of going all over the place, but any and then there's other certifications too. So those are just 2 I have, but there are some that are also a little bit more like applicable in other places, like for example, the purchase or project management certification. That's a big one, and that can be in different fields. You see that mainly in tech and engineering and I would say high business, but yeah, so that's just kind of like a little bit of a taste of how that works, but yeah, they're definitely very important, I would say, and helpful when it comes to applying for jobs.
So my question to you with that, for somebody who is either in the workforce right now or trying to return to the workforce, these certifications are helpful. Are they requisite?
Depends on the position. 9 times out of 10, they are not. I couldn't have worked in purchasing if they were. But I'll say this, if you're looking to advance into middle management and up, and when I say middle management, I'm also including ICs or individual contributors as well. But any role where you're going to, and I'll just be frank, earning a salary of 70,000 and up, they're looking for these certifications. They're looking for those prized experiences. They're looking for something that's going to differentiate you from the other 100 applicants at the in their inbox. So
here's a question. Do you have to have a certain level of degree? Do you have to have a certain level of secondary education in order to go forward with these types of certifications? Or can you come fresh out the box with a high school diploma or a GED and say, okay, I've been working in these areas. So I was a store manager, right? So that was the highest level I went to in retail. If I was, let's say I had moved up to a DM, or even an area ops manager, and I decided, okay, I want to take this next step, but maybe I haven't finished my degree. Can I then go and apply to get these certifications? Where would I get these certifications from? Do I get them from my local college? Like, where do you go about obtaining that?
Okay, so the first answer is 9 times out of 10, yes. At least for the ones that I've pursued. The only caveat is you just need more work experience, but 9 times out of 10, you're already going to have that. So just like as I mentioned earlier, if you have a high school diploma, for both of the certifications I have, I think you need 5 years of experience before pursuing it. In terms of where to go, there are trade organizations that specifically offer these certifications, and that's something you also want to look at is, okay, and 9 times out of 10, your employer already knows if you don't know or need guidance there. But so, for example, the CPSM, that comes from ISM or Institute of Supply Management, and then for the CSCP, that is, and sorry, it is APIX. Yeah, I always get that one incorrect. But so, but again, short answer is yes. There are certain industries that offer different types of certifications, and your employer, which 9 times out of 10, they're already going to be thrilled that you're even asking, hey, where can I go for these certifications? Because you're already showing initiative. and in my opinion, which we can get into later, as our society is moving more towards um, really more, I guess, advanced information centric type of society, I feel like these things will become requisites in the future. But if you're already coming again, showing that initiative, already ahead of the trend, that's already a great start. And like I said, you can take them at universities. A lot of times, a lot of these organizations are in partnership with universities, but you can also like the last two I took. They offer online courses. They'll send you the books, um, and I would actually highly suggest going through your employer because 9 times out of 10 they'll sponsor you. So both of these I was sponsored. So to me it's a win-win. So
Because that was my next question. Is there a cost involved
well, yeah,
for taking these certifications? Because I would assume so. And then if there is, like, what? So, question number one, because cost is not only limited to dollars, but it's also time. So, what is the actual fiscal amount? What's the dollar cost? Just an estimate,
sure.
and then what's the time frame? So for one certification, is it a 6-week certification and it's 8 hours every Saturday and Sunday? Like, is it 16 hours every week for 6 weeks, or like, talk us through that?
Okay, sure. So typically they'll offer three different options. So there's self-study, which is what I did. Um, you can take classes, and those usually do range I mean, again, it depends on how intense the pace you want to go. Most I've seen have usually been anywhere from 3 to 6 months, and not straight, but just maybe it's like once a week or once every 2 weeks, because they understand that you're working and fit with your schedule. And then the next option is usually like a combination of the two. Like if you want to take a class or just to make sure you're on track, you can do that. So both of them I did were self-study. I gave myself 6 months to get the supply chain certification, so I pursued that one first in 2021, and then for the CPSM, which I obtained last year, pretty much gave myself a year to get that done. So it really, again, it depends on how you learn, your level of discipline, and then two, again, your budget. So if they are going to fund you for taking the classes and that works for you, go for it. If you prefer doing self-study, that works too. So just as long as for a lot of these certifications, you do have to have, again, so you have to hit the requirements, but assuming you hit the prerequisites, it just comes down to being prepared and passing the exam. So
That's good. So now you have all of these certifications, you have these degrees, you have all of this experience. For the person who maybe doesn't have the certifications yet, maybe they have a degree, maybe not. How are they to present themselves? What would your recommendation be for them to present themselves so that they have a shot to get in a position, especially in a really competitive world? Because a lot of the times being in the room or in the interview space will make the difference, right?
right,
If you don't have all of the qualifications, if you don't have everything on paper necessarily, but you're a great talker, you can present yourself well, somebody might be more willing to give you an opportunity. But if you're not well spoken, because not everyone is, if you're not well spoken, or you get nervous when you're on the spot, and so you start losing your vocabulary all of a sudden and everything is ums and uhs, what would you recommend? How should they, one, present themselves on paper so they can get into the room? And then once they're in the room, what would you recommend? Because I see you have this book here, Who Gets Promoted, Who Doesn't, and Why. And I'm really fascinated to know, why you have this book here. But I'm trying to pace myself. I get hyped.
no worries, no worries. So for starters, and in terms of getting in the room, or presenting yourself, I guess, before getting into the room. So, actually, I'll just show you since I have my resume. But so when it comes to, and we still use resumes, so, but when it comes to resumes, this first, sorry, the lighting, but this first third, that's going to be the most important part of that resume. And I say that because...
All right, talk us through what that first third says, because at least from my perspective right here, it's I can't see it really clearly. Can you hold it a little closer to the camera?
Sure. So the first third, you have your name, contact information, number. Now with addresses, you really just need to have your city and state at this point.
Okay.
And then really what you either are or what you're aspiring, or what you're aspiring to be, essentially.
Okay.
And then that next section, you really, and this is something that I'm glad we're talking about, because I see this a lot. So, I have moonlighted as a resume writer professionally for the last 2 years. And one of the things that has changed in the industry is there used to be, hey, go ahead and put your objective statement in that first part. Stop. Don't do that. And the reason why is because of, and I would say really the world in general, but as an American, I guess from a U.S. perspective, we really tend to think more from a product base. So if you're presenting yourself, if you want to get picked off the shelf, essentially, go with the store metaphor, you want to have something that says, hey, this is why you should pick me. And so what you want to do is, in this, you want to really explain what you have to offer to your employee. This is kind of like your pre-cover letter. And like I said, we can talk about the utility of cover letters too.
So this is like a commercial.
Exactly.
This section right here. So you're advertising yourself.
Exactly.
And okay. So this is your advertising dollars right here. Okay.
Yep. This is the advertisement. So headline. Okay. This is your title of the movie, and then, like you said, here's the commercial. Here's what's it about. Coming out now. You want to go to it or not?
Okay.
So, and in that, you really want to have, and it really just depends again on your experience, but anywhere from 3 to 5 lines, just explaining, hey, these are some of the things I've done, and these are the absolute highlights. So, I've done X, I've changed this department, I came in here and did X, Y, and Z. Because at the end of the day, yes, degrees and certifications, they help, but people want to know what you can do. They want to know what your potential is. So, and I remember having a conversation with my director when I was still at Dollar Tree. Some of the most senior people that are either on the board or are in the C-suite, some of them, they got an associate's degree or no degree. So it is possible, and that's one thing I actually admired Family Dollar about, that we had guys who were just knocking out of the park that came from the store, that were cashier, and now X years later they're running a department, they're in operations, they're opening distribution centers. So and again, it comes back to the way you present yourself. So that third, I would say, that's the most important part. That's really where you want to spend most of your time. And then we can kind of, it's up to you. I can kind of walk through the other points of the resume, or I can jump into when
I
you're
want to spend a few more minutes right there in that section, because I want to make sure that everybody's clear where this is not where you want to say, I was a store manager, I was in management for 7 years. This is where you want to say, while I was in management, I kept my shrink below 3%. Actually, my shrink was always at 1. And I know I'm speaking in terms of being in a store, and some of you have never had retail experience, right? So shrink is the stuff that's walking out your store. When the people come and they borrow it off the shelf and they forget to pay for it. That's what shrink is. Okay. And then your damages as well. Things that arrive to the store already damaged from the warehouse, things that get damaged because somebody's little busybody kid was over there touching the glass they weren't supposed to touch. And then you hear shatter, shatter, clatter, clatter. Right. All of that goes into your shrink. So to keep your shrink at 3% or below means that if my store did $100,000 in sales for this fiscal period, out of that, only 3% of that 100,000 or less is loss to the company. Okay? Yes? Okay.
Yep.
So y'all know I know what I'm talking about. This is not something that I'm making up off the top of my head, okay?
That's right.
And another thing that if you are looking to go into retail, even if you're not looking to go into retail, one of the things that I would suggest is that you get familiar with profits and losses statements. Those are also called P&Ls. You want to get familiar with what they look like, not just for retail, but it's actually really good for personal management as well, to manage your life. How am I managing my resources? Look at where you got gains coming in and where everything is going out. Because if you have more losses than you have profits, we need to reevaluate what we have going on here, because some ain't right. True or true?
Oh yeah, true.
So in that first third, that's where we want to celebrate the things that we've done. I kept my shrink low. I had low employee turnover. I actually was able to train 7 employees for them to be able to move up to either peer positions or to move beyond me in other companies. Those are the types of highlights that you're talking about celebrating?
Yes. And I would say, to add on top of that, in that first third, but in that first third, I would also put anything that you can quantify. So any numbers, like I trained 7 people, or I helped build this from $100,000 to $1 million operation. Those are the things that are going to help people understand the size and scope of what you already have done. And then from there, they'll be able to do the mental calculus to kind of say, okay, if we take this person on, maybe we can take them from $1 million to 5 million or 25 million or et cetera. Because, yeah, I'm kind of jumping ahead here, but one of the most important things of this book that really it just blew me away was promotions are not a reward for past performance.
Come on, say it again. You're talking right, sir. Say it again. Preach to the children.
So promotions are not a reward for past performance. Promotions are essentially an investment in what they anticipate as your future performance.
That's good.
A lot of people miss this.
Good.
A lot of people miss this.
That's good. That's real good. And I'm so moved by that statement, because I have worked in places where people felt slighted for the promotion because either they've been there for an extended period, so they feel like their seniority should move them up, even though they are ill or underqualified for the position. And also people who feel like, well, look at all that I've done, right? And that's most of us,
right,
because a lot of us, that's how we've been able to move forward before. Look at all that I've done. Doesn't this count for anything? Yes, it counts for what you did. What are you doing? And what is it about that that's telling me that if I move you into this position, you're going to forward this? Because most of us, and I've talked about this in previous episodes, right? We enjoy linear complaining. We do everything on a linear scale, right?
Right.
What does that mean to do linear complaining? It means that you come to me and you say, oh my God, I'm tired of this place. When every time I turn the water on, the water is brown. And I say, I know, it's terrible. They need to do something about it. And instead of you going to the they that need to do something about it, you still talking to me. I can't fix the water. I'm not a plumber. But you're going to talk to me and talk to me and talk to me until you blue in the face. You're never going to write the letter to the person who can do something about it. You're never going to call the person who can do something about it. You're going to continue to complain about it, get no results. That's linear movement. You're just moving across a line. You got to go up the chain. You got to climb the ladder. So it's the same kind of thing. But Gerrick, this ain't my interview. This is yours. So you do some speaking on this because this is good. I'm excited.
No, I really, I'll kind of go on a brief tangent here because it's something thank you. Because speaking of linear versus nonlinear, one of the things I really wanted to kind of discuss, and this is why I've really gotten passionate about career development, resume writing, career planning, is because our grandparents, parents, I also speak more generations, so boomers, Gen X, millennials, I would say particularly boomers in particular, you know, it came from a model where, you go to a job, you work there for 20, 30, 40 years, you get a pension, you get your gold star, you get your watch, and then, you quote unquote right out into the sunset in your 60s. And at least the Gen X and millennials know that's been gone. That model no longer exists. And in terms of how this relates to linear and nonlinear, I think a lot of the reason why a lot of, unfortunately, employees do get into this trap is because I think, again, with the way that we're brought up, in school and things like that, there was a set, in school was a set curriculum. You kind of knew, okay, these are things you need to do. And if for any reason, you came up short, etc., like there were I'm going to say there are always tools in place, but theoretically speaking, there should have been tools in place, but that's a whole nother conversation. But in the workplace, and that's why I would call, there was this professor from Michigan, read a lot of books, professor in Michigan that talked about complexity and had this whole course on complexity. And he really talked about 3 different types of landscapes. Talks about the simple landscape. Simple landscape, and he uses Mount Fuji as an example. You see the peak, okay, I need to just go this direction, and pretty much any direction you go on that peak, you're going to reach it. Assume you don't run out of breath, but you go there, yes, at some point you'll reach that peak. Very straightforward. Then you have the rugged landscape where it's more complicated. You might have multiple peaks, might be like we have the Appalachian Mountains here. You might not know which one's like the highest of the peaks, but you can get some help, you can work with people, etc., get some training, and you'll eventually be able to kind of get there too. Just might take a little bit longer, but it's still fixed. Third landscape, and this is the landscape of the world right now, and especially the job market, is complex. And complex landscapes, there really isn't a peak, or if there is a peak, it's for a temporary point in time because it's constantly moving, it's constantly shifting. And so with a lot of the boomers, and even some Gen X, unfortunately, I've kind of seen, they'll kind of stop at a certain point or mentality, but the landscape's still moving. And so after so much time, they're thinking, oh, I should be up here, or I should be X, Y, and Z. And when it doesn't happen, it is, and is really unfortunate. It is really tragic because, right, as we all know, with our careers, this is how we bring food to the table. This is how we feed our family. This is how, right, we, unless you're an investor or you own, if you own a business that can support your lifestyle, I'll say that,
that part.
Yeah, this is
because you might own a business and it might not support your lifestyle. Right. Amen, sing.
Right. Amen. That, yeah. But your career, that's essentially your main way of living, of surviving, of keeping all of this afloat. So if you're not moving up, and as we know, the world's going to move with or without you, right, you're going to get left behind. And I've especially seen this a lot, unfortunately, in certain, marginalized communities. So, so that's a big reason why, obviously we're here today. and really want to get these points across, because a lot of times there's a saying, suffering is the product of limited knowledge. I think that was by Sri Srivankar, but I love that quote because a lot of times it's not necessarily an issue of will or capability. It's usually just not having the right information or the right direction. So, and this is why I love what you're doing on this podcast, and I'm obviously honored to be here. So, but getting back to the resume. So,
Yeah.
so of course, like I said, the first third is the commercial, and this is where you'd be spending most of your time. This is where you want, if you have friends who are pretty good at resumes or writing in general, this is where you want them to say, hey, please take a look at this. The second half, second half here is, it is your job experience, but, and this is kind of where I really kind of go off the handle a little bit, you really want to state what the company you worked for and the job, but you really want to state after that things that you actually accomplished. So I always say this, and a lot of resume writers will say this: your resume is not your autobiography. It is not. I'll say this, if you're, I would say, mid-level and up, 2 to 3 pages are fine, but for everybody else, it should all be on 1 page. And I say that because if this passes through, so let me back up a little bit. So when you're submitting these, 9 times out of 10, it's going through an ATS, which is applicant tracking system.
Because I was just about to ask.
Yep. So they're already looking, and that's why I said that third is really the most important, because that's really for the humans, I would say. It's for the machines too, so you pass the keywords, but if you're putting all the right information, it's going to pass the ATS and land on the hiring manager's lap. So when he or she is looking at it, they're looking at it for 3 seconds max. So a lot of times they may get to your most recent job, but 9 times out of 10, they're really looking at that first section, which again, that's why that real estate, as they'll say a lot, is the most important. So I can't stress that enough. That first top, if that first top is not prim and proper, it's going trash. So, but assuming it's prim and proper, and you got that, then they'll want to know more. So that second, I guess that half, or I would say 2/3, this is where you really want to talk about, again, your accomplishments. Because if you're assuming that you're in the industry or you're trying to get into a certain industry, they're going to know, okay, this is what a supply chain specialist is, or what they wrote the job description, so they know what they're looking for. What they want to know is what makes you, again, different. So I'd say conflict.
So let me ask you something.
Yeah.
Let me interrupt you.
Sure.
How does what we're saying in the initial commercial, how are we differentiating from that to this? So in the initial commercial, we're specifying what we've done over the years, and then in this latter portion, now we're honing in specifically at this company, or like how are we? What's the difference between the information we're putting up here and the information we're putting down here?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's a great way to put it. This is a snapshot of what you're doing over the years. So you can put, like, first thing I put on mine, for example, MBA with experience in purchasing, sourcing, project management, supply chain, retail, transportation, information systems. That's the first sentence. And that pretty much captures everything I pretty much have done since I was 18. So, so yes, this is essentially, this is who I am, and these are the things that I've done that I think would be important to you. Then after that, yes, then we're going from the, the high picture, high level to, all right, here are some details, here are some bullets. And again, kind of taking a little bit of tangent again. One of the things I would suggest while you're on whichever job or position or role, even if you're just volunteering, any type of accomplishment, any type of mention, recognition, things like that, jot that down somewhere and save that. So whenever you are, which they suggest every 6 months, but I'm kind of like everybody else. I don't really do it until it's time to update your resume. You can pull that out and say, oh yeah, we did do that project and I did get that mention, or I did get this quote from somebody. I can, with of course their permission, I can put that there, things like that. So those are the things that are going to pop out that are, again, you're not going to remember a year, 2 years, 3 years later. So that's my little tangent. But but yeah, you want to have really, again, what were the big things that you've done, and it's subjective. So maybe some people, like for example, I put down that I created SOPs and core process of supply chain. So if this job that I'm applying for is very structured, they may not care about that. Oh, good.
SOPs, standard operating procedures. Thanks. Continue.
Thank you. But if in this case, in this scenario, was really helpful, if you're working in a department where they're still building the department, that might be very valuable. They might be like, hey, how did you do this? And now that already changed the whole conversation to, should we even hire you to, okay, what have you done? And that gives you a chance to shine. So again, these things are kind of jumping off points at any point in time. And a lot of times for the jobs, I will say in the past that I have, been offered, that's usually what will happen. They'll say, oh, I see you did Excel, you did VBA or Visual Basic application. How'd you do that? How'd you automate your workflow? Things like that. And that's that's a conversation you want to have. So because that's already putting you against Tom, Jimmy, Tyrone. Like they're not even thinking about those people now. Now they're like, okay, how did you do this, Passion? How and that's where you want to be. So, and there's other things that I can mention in terms of putting it out there. But I would say again, getting into those accomplishments. I already mentioned quantifying things as well. And then I haven't mentioned this, but this should be kind of throughout your resume, but using power verbs. Don't use passive language.
Expound on that, because I'm real big on vocabulary on this particular podcast. I'm big on vocabulary. So let me just let y'all know, it's genetic, right? All of us. It doesn't matter where we grew up. All of us, this whole family, we're a bunch of nerds, okay? And we're real big on words and grammar. I don't know why. It's for whatever reason, it legitimately is in our bloodline. All of us are like this, right? So talk to them about power verbs, what that means, how to utilize them, because a lot of people are real careless about language. They just pick words and throw them in and feel like, oh, you know what? Well, this sounds like this might fit here, and I'm just gonna shoot for the stars and hope that I land in the sky somewhere. And that's not it. Not with something as critical as this. So, what is a power verb, and what do you mean by passive language?
Okay, of course. So, not to take you back to grade school, but at least in the English, I guess King's English, European English dialect, that you have subject, verb, object. So you are 9 times out of 10 are the subject. Verb is the action, and the object is whatever you're doing to that action. So So power verbs are verbs that essentially are going to keep saying stand out, but it's true that show you doing a certain, like, there's movement. So so for example, you can say, let's say that you manage a team. So you can say, for example, there was a team that I managed or was managed by me. So that is an example of passive, because what you're doing is you're taking the object, which is the team, and you're kind of, again, reversing it. So you're kind of saying, okay, well, this was kind of almost like done to me, like it just like happened. Versus when you're using verbs like I managed a team or I supervised a team, and I would say, and those are better verbs, those are better actions, because now it's showing that you had a direct impact to cause this result. So the team was managed, like, by you. Power verbs takes that to another level. So I would say, for example, and this is something I would do if I was rewriting the sentence, I would say led team through X circumstance. And I might even just to even really take it home, I might even say led team which was here to there. So now I can say, okay, not only did he did the duty of managing the team, but they were at this person's, this state of time, and then through his leadership took them there. And again, now it's a whole, again, conversation. It's a whole nother perception. You're not just, putting your card, well, I was about to say Kmart, but what's Kmart now? At Walmart. I was telling you, it's a shifting landscape.
No, but it's a fact though. It's a fact though. And so for those of you who are entrepreneurs, if you are you've been in the entrepreneur space and maybe for whatever reason you need to return to the workforce, or maybe you're not returning to the workforce, but you're looking at how to formulate your grant proposal or your business plan, even with that, saying I started a business, congratulations, that's great. Saying I founded this limited liability corporation in this time you'd be surprised the game that semantics is, but semantics has all the power in the world. Going from saying, well, I started a business to saying I founded this company, it's like, oh, okay, well, you're a founder, okay. People are going to listen to that differently. They're going to receive it differently because it just has a different context to it, even though they're synonymous. You still said the same thing. It's the same thing from you saying, well, I'm a store clerk versus you saying I'm an inventory specialist.
Right.
There's no lie. You are an inventory specialist and you're engineering this being put out a certain way, making sure that the shelves are managed a certain way, making sure that the flow of the supply goes a certain way. That's going to make somebody look at you and say, okay, well, you know what? I think this person might actually, even if they don't have the skill set yet, they might actually be qualified for the training to go into this next space. Versus the person who says, well, I stock the shelves and I face the products. Oh, okay. Well, somebody got to drive the bus. So that's cool.
Yeah. And I would even add to that. And that's, we talked about how we kind of get in the door. Being able to utilize that language and again, of course, in an honest manner. So, the disclosure, I'm not talking about lying here. I'm talking about, again, using your words and language effectively.
Phraseology.
Yep, phraseology, exactly. I love language.
It's genetic.
It must be. It must be. But being able to use you will be able to again position yourself, and I can attest to this. So a while ago I wrote an article called creating opportunities, and I'll just kind of give you this.
Where can they find that article if they wanted to read it?
So that's on my LinkedIn.
Okay.
Yep, under my name, Gerrick Hilliard Jr. So essentially it's just a story, a true story of how I was having a hard time as a undergrad. I think I was like a sophomore at the time, trying to get a job for the summer. I even went all over the place. I went to Walmart, I went to Dollar Tree, even went to Waffle House. Even Waffle House said no. So that was kind of depressing. But but I just so happened when I was sitting outside on that sidewalk, I just saw a hotel, and I was like, you know what? I had nothing to lose. Let me just go over there. And I went to that hotel, and I think it was like a Holiday Inn Express, and they still didn't have a job, but and I honestly I just asked them if there are other opportunities or what are things that they're looking for, and that's another thing again, positioning it towards them, not towards me, because I may or may not have talked about this in here, but there's another lesson itself saying, okay, I need a job versus what are some gaps in your workflow that you need help with, because that's another different conversation, and they're more than happy to tell you. And sure enough, they said, well, night auditors are usually a problem, you know.
Right.
We do not currently have any openings, but Kenwood Suites does. So,
See?
went to Kenwood Suites, and I was no way qualified at all. But I was able to use experience from my role in student government, what I was doing volunteering, and was able to, I don't even know how, again, this is 10 plus years ago, but position in a way where they say, okay, you know what, you're not qualified. And I'm like, I know.
Right.
But I can see that you have skills that can be transferable skills into this role. So I think that you can perform this role with the right guidance and training. And then boom. Long story short.
So I want to just take a minute right there. Not just transferable skills, you said with the right guidance and training. So a key there, you have to be coachable. You have to be coachable. It does not matter how much you know. When you're coming into a position that you're not qualified for, you have to be coachable. Even if you know a lot, even if you are a super nerd and you're always reading books and you're always doing research and you have like a plethora of information, you have a whole arsenal of information on everything you've read, still be willing to receive what your trainer is giving you. Because now you're listening to what they're saying because they're looking at that. Am I talking to a wall or am I talking to someone who's receptive? After I've given you this information, if you have additional information that you can give to me, okay, now we're having an information exchange. But if every time I try to give you something, you're challenging me, you're pushing back, you're saying, no, this person isn't open to being coached. So I can't really train them for this position. So now you've just disqualified yourself, and everything that you could have allowed yourself and every other door that you could have opened, you've now shut in your own face. You want to blame that person and say, oh, nah, it's because, they didn't like the fact that I knew what I was talking about. And maybe they didn't, but they were also in the training position. So in order to be a great leader, you have to be an excellent follower.
Agreed. And that's the other thing too. They're not going to tell you. So they're not going to tell you, okay, you're done. Next. And then when you ask, oh, why was I passed over? So because there's been benefits. I'll tell you this. So benefits of working in the warehouse when I was first starting purchasing. you get exposure to everyone up and down the spectrum. And honestly, and again, now I'm shifting back to career advice, but you want to have a positive reputation with everybody. Doesn't matter if they're senior, VP of multiple plants, or if they're picking up the trash, because you just never know who's interacting with who and who's having conversations with who
and why.
And hopefully it's obvious by now, but when it comes to interviews, a lot of people tend to disqualify themselves out the gate by not treating the receptionist with the same respect that they treat whoever's interviewing them. Because as soon as
I hope y'all taking notes. He's talking real good. He's talking real good, because the reality of the situation, think about it from this perspective. The janitor in the corporation that you feel like, oh, he's just a janitor, he just sweeps floors, he just mops, I don't really care. You don't know that janitor could be the CEO's grandfather, who's a proud man and who raised his family and who got everybody through college on a janitor's salary. And he didn't want to do anything outside of this because he's really proud of what he does. So while you over here talking down to the janitor, you're talking down to the CEO's grandfather. So the CEO already got you on his list, because it's like, well, you just disrespected my grandfather because you thought he was nobody. And he's the one who got me in this position in the first place. So now I don't have anything left for you. I really don't care what you're capable of.
Oh, yeah.
Because you don't know how to respect people. And that's a real thing. You have no idea what relationships people have. And without you maintaining and maintaining the relationship and treating everybody with value, the same type of value you would want everybody to treat you with, if you don't do that, you are discounting and disqualifying yourself from so much.
No, 100%. And I'll even add to that too, which another thing that, especially now, in the age that we're in, you have to be able to network effectively. And that's usually where it starts. It usually starts in the workplace. Well, it technically based on, whether you go to school or not, but whoever you're around. So, whether if you do go to a religious organization affiliation, schools, nonprofits, wherever you're at, like that plays a big part, because again, you just never know. So I'll just give you, since we've been talking about entrepreneurship here and there, I went 2 days ago to the Durham was actually hosting an event for the Black entrepreneurship, and I think it was the Carolina Small Business Fund, I think is what it's actually called. But I just so happened to, I'd got my little, signed up, got my little card, and got my little punch and cookies, and sat down. And it turned out there was a woman in front of me, and there was a man right next to me. And the woman in front of me, she is a successful author. She basically chronicled her experience going through the foster care system, and is now helping others, reaching out and going back. And then the man next to me, he's buying up commercial properties all over town. I think I was in disbelief when he was talking to a banker that passed by, and the banker was like, "Hey, we need to link up." And he was like, "Yeah, I got like 700 million worth of property around town." And so again, and of course I connected with both of them. And again, you just never know. And had I just looked at them and just said, like nothing, I mean, that right there can make the difference in your business, and the same thing with careers, so you really, and you also too, another thing, and I think a lot of the more seasoned people understand this too or more, but you never know what direction people are going to go. So just really quick story, just how I got this job was actually through a connection that was made at Man and Hummel. And we weren't even at Man and Hummel at the same time, but we were trying to work on something, and we were trying to have Man and Hummel go to a career fair, but this was time of COVID, so at that time it was a no-go. But we made that connection. That person took a new position at Grifols, and then a year later, and I was just shooting in the dark. I just reached out and said, "Hey, are you looking for any senior buyers?" And she said, "It just so happened that we're actually looking for one. Send me your resume." So you just never know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What does they say? Your network determines your net worth.
Yep.
So you don't know who's who. You don't know where they can propel you. You don't know where you could propel them. And sometimes it's not about the people that can propel you forward right now. It's about the people that you can propel forward right now. Because just like I told you 2 episodes ago, when I was working at that retailer, I got that position. I found out about that position because of somebody who came in under me in another company. They didn't forget how I treated them. They didn't forget what I taught them. So when I was in a position of need, it was, oh, well, I just got a job here and they're hiring. Fill out the application. I'll let them know that you're filling out your application, yada, yada, yada. So definitely with that. So now we've covered a lot. We talked about part 1, the commercial. We talked about the specifics for this particular company. Okay. So somebody like me who had to work multiple jobs, and some of them, they were working them simultaneously, right? Because with the previous format of the resume, you would have your objective statement, and then you would have the places where you worked, and you would give a summary of the job, what you did. I did this, I did this, I did this. And then at the end, you would have you have the addresses and the dates that you were there, right? And so I remember one time I had filled out an application. No, I submitted my resume, and they felt like I wasn't a good fit because I think one person felt like I wasn't a good fit because I had too many jobs. And I'm like, clearly you're not looking at the dates, right? This is what I'm thinking in my head, because I'm working these 3 jobs that you're looking at. I was working them simultaneously because none of these jobs were paying me enough for me to sustain myself. Right. So yeah, it looks crazy, but I was actually, if you look at the dates, that's not an exaggeration. I was working all 3 of these jobs at the same time. Wow. Would you recommend that somebody present that? If that's what their job experience is, how do they present that on the resume so that they don't look like a flight risk, they don't look like they're unreliable, so that it reads like, whatever I have to do to be able to maintain and to sustain, I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to put in that hard work, up to and including working 3 jobs simultaneously if that's what it requires. How do they present themselves on paper to make somebody see, wow, this person is dedicated. They're going to get it done. This is somebody that I can really count on.
So in those situations, when I get clients like that, so really there's 2 things. So first, I'll kind of explain the different types briefly. So there's 3 types of resumes. So there's reverse chronological, which is what we just talked about. You have your name, statement, and then, from current to sometimes umpteen years ago, your resume, education, skills, and then whatever else.
Question on that, because you said umpteen years ago. Is there a cutoff for how far back you should be talking about? Because I know you said depending on what level you're applying for, your resume should have a certain amount of pages, right? So if you've been working for the last 20 years and you've worked in all these different fields, but all of the fields that you've worked in, all the places that you've worked, they don't necessarily correlate or correspond to the place where you're applying now. do you still want to include that on your resume, or do you want to say, additional information is available upon request?
So again, really depends on the profession and industry. So if you're not even, well, okay. So if you're in medicine, if you're in academia, or if you're in research or government research, you want everything on there, because they are going to want to look at the whole gamut, what projects you've worked on, what hospitals, were you a resident, all of that. So that's kind of the only exception where, yes, you do want that 5-10 page resume. Even then, you still shrink it. So I did a resume for a pharmacist who was basically trying to procure a job or get a job as a MSL, which is a medical science liaison. And so in that situation, that was a 3-page resume, and she was like my age, so that was like one exception. So everybody else, I would say, limit it to 3 to 5 jobs. So that answer that. Now going back to the previous question, with the 3 jobs, what you want to do is you really want to put what is the most pertinent job to the position you're applying for. And in order to kind of show that, hey, you did other things as well, that's really where you can put out again that top third. You can kind of weave that in there. So, for example, let's just say you were, let's say that you were stocking shelves, you were, working as a bookkeeper, and then you were also, just say working a hotel. So if you're applying to be an accountant, you're going to put the bookkeeper job. But then you can also weave in and say, has also worked in the XX industry, or you can weave in a way where it's like, oh, so I see you were in, obviously you were in finance, but you're also in retail. How did that come about? It's like, oh, well, while I was working this or learning the skills of an accountant, I was also doing this on the side. And you're right. I mean, that was actually one of my first jobs out of college, or stateside jobs out of college. I think I was working like 2 jobs or something like that. Or I was working a job that was also in school. And so they really appreciated that. And they're like, okay, so you're a hard worker. So yeah, so there's definitely ways to do that. But yeah, in terms of like presentation, the job that's most pertinent, especially if you're doing a few at the same time, I would definitely list that, because when it comes to resumes, and again, so general rule. So again, resumes not your autobiography. General resumes usually go nowhere. You need to tailor it to whatever the position is. And so that right there will kind of give you an answer in terms of what roles are necessary. Now, you don't want to, if you have to show gaps, but obviously you want to show like, okay, I did have this like history of things. And you can even highlight certain aspects of your role that might be pertinent to that job. So that's how I would go about it.
Okay. I had cut you off. You were breaking it down. You were saying there were different styles of resume, and where I cut you off was when you said reverse chronological, and then you were gonna say something about the other styles. Yes. But I interrupted. I apologize.
No worries. Thank you. So yes, reverse chronological, and this is the most common one. This is the one you're probably going to see 9 times out of 10, and it's the most recommended. The second is functional, and this is truly just jobs that are that you think again are going to be most pertinent to the position, but they may not be in order. And I really,
Hey, that's a good point, because I never knew that that was okay.
it's typically not.
Okay,
um,
'cause I'm like, I didn't know that was a thing.
yeah, it's one of those situations where this, if it's just kind of like a last resort. It's like, if nothing else, use this option, because what that's telling to the manager is, oh, this person has gaps. Things aren't, it's what's wrong, essentially, and then they're kind of trying to look to see where where the thread is that they can pull. So again, it's there, it's an option, but there's really only few select times where you want to use that path, and even then, I'd still be like, do you really want to use the functional format? Um, then the third is hybrid, and this is a pretty good one, especially for those who are transitioning back into work, um, or are moving into a completely different field altogether. So let's say you're a stay-at-home mom and you're trying to get back into the workforce, or you were
Mhm,
in the army and now you're moving into civilian work. So these are
mhm,
roles where you can kind of mix the two and kind of say, okay, I was, I don't know, a private working X logistics. This matches best to, working a job as a picker or as a, operations manager or X, Y, and Z. So
mhm.
that's where you combine it to. And I've done that one before. But again, usually I use that option when it comes to, again, situations where somebody's moving from one industry or from one space into another. So, like, completely.
So, okay, for somebody who, going back to, you said not functional is not ideal, right? Because it highlights the gaps. So now, for the person who has the gaps because they were in a field, right? So I used to be in medical billing. And when our department got outsourced, I was applying. I was not getting any hits, but the rent was still due and the bill still needed to be paid. And I have other skill sets outside of medical billing. So that's why, wanting to tap into another portion of my skill sets, also needing to be able to have some type of income coming in. That's why there were gaps. So if I decided I wanted to return to medical billing today, then a hybrid would be a better resume format for me, because it's been X years. Wow, it's been, we're not going to talk about how many years it's been, but it's been a few minutes since I've been a medical biller, so I would use a hybrid.
Yes, and and I,
Okay.
and I think that's helpful, because again, you can mix and match, and again, things that you may not even thought was relevant that you're working in those other jobs, you know,
Right.
that you can build that to paint a better picture. So,
Okay. All right. Um, Interview tips. What would you recommend for interview tips?
okay. So, interview tips. So I guess let's just start from the way beginning, because you can't assume these things anymore.
Right.
Unless you're in a field where your knowledge and skill set are exponentially more important than your appearance, you need to make sure you're groomed. So, and I only the reason why I bring that up is because we of course in the fall we went to the career fair at ECU, my alma mater, and there were some students who were well groomed, um, everything was professional cut, and others who were a little more ruffled.
That is such a complimentary way of saying it. I did a paper, and some of the research that I found was absolutely astonishing. People, all of the HR reps Well, like I've had people come in like a Hawaiian shirt, Bermuda shorts, and flip flops, and they came for an interview like they were just coming from a beach day. They have people that come in and they're like, I was really tired, and so like, you know, can we just make this brief? Like, I'm I'm sorry, what? Like, I don't. You need a job. Like, I'm already employed. What you just asked me? Like, so decorum and presentation matter. What else would you suggest to the people?
Yeah, and just to quickly tap on that point too, that is changing. So I would also say read the room. So you don't
Okay.
like if you're again, this typically a lot of more tech companies have a more casual type of coming. So
Don't come in your flip flops. Don't let Gerrick confuse you. Don't come in your flip flops with your crusty feet. Don't do that. Don't do that. And don't come in your beach shorts. Don't come in your Bermuda shorts unless the office is on the beach. Don't do that. At least a pair of khakis and a button down. Have some decency, y'all. Don't let him lie to you like that.
so I'll just say this: 9 times out of 10, yes, you're just obviously going to suit up, and again, and they'll let you know. So, and the reason why I bring this up is that in my very, very, very first job, they said, please don't come in a suit. Still dress nicely, but this is kind of what you can dress like. So I had like a suit jacket, button down, and like jeans or something. But they were like nice jeans and stuff. But again, that's kind of the exception. So yes, dress nicely.
And also because on the flip side of that, one of my girlfriends just experienced that, where when she interviewed, everybody was there in like jeans. She didn't know it was a dress down day. So when she came for the position, nobody had explained to her or nobody had advised her that there was a dress code. So she came according to what she had seen when she interviewed, when she came in the space. And then she got to work on her first day looking very casual, and everybody's looking at her like, oh, well, you look relaxed. Because she didn't know, but she had to make that clear. Like, nobody disclosed to me that
Right.
this was a one-off. So I didn't know. It was my understanding that this was the standard. So definitely read the room, but it will never hurt you to ask the question, is this appropriate, or what is the dress code if there is one?
Definitely. So yeah, I agree 100%. And don't be afraid to ask those questions, because again, that shows that you're interested. You're trying to work with them, so it's actually a positive. So other things I would say in terms of interview questions or interview tips. We already talked about being nice and courteous to everyone. I would, and again, this really depends on the type of interview that you're on, but I would say just from a general standpoint, I would say be prepared to talk about past situations you've had. So these are behavioral questions. Tell me of a time when you disagree with a supervisor on a decision.
How did you handle it?
Right, exactly. So have those, and there's tons of resources online. You can talk to people, and I honestly, if you're in a lucky enough position or blessed enough position to where you know people in that industry, I would say talk to them and say, hey, what are the kind of things that they're looking for, or are kind of like the norm, etc. So you can kind of again prepare. I have friends who are in startup type of environments, and so they're able to I haven't been in a startup environment, but if I were to go that route, I already know who to tap and say, hey, how does this work? Because I've been in, for the most part, pretty much traditional corporate environments. So so those are helpful. Knowledge-based questions, and honestly, this is more so for like STEM. So what's that? Science, technology, engineering, math. And then,
It's Steam now because now they got arts
oh
in there.
yeah, you're right. Yep,
Hmm.
Steam. So of course, I mean those. Yeah, you gotta know those. So again, just preparing. And what I typically try to do is when I'm preparing for a certain position, and this may be over preparing, but just learning from past experiences, I find it helpful.
Hmm.
Usually look at 1 to 2 steps above that
Hmm.
position and what
Hmm.
are those skills and things that they're looking for. Um, and I do that just so I can kind of get an idea of what are some of the things that they may be looking at or they may
Right.
be trying to do or handle. And if they kind of see that you're already could potentially speak their language, they can say, oh, not only can I hire this person, but I might be able to train this person to take on my position because they're of course looking at the next person's position and onward. So, and that's a plus. Those are that's
Let's
definitely.
call that a mobility metric.
Yep.
This way we can look at this person and see like how mobile they can be in the company. Is we go into jobs or into positions and a lot of us are looking at whether or not there's room for growth. The same way you're looking at whether or not there's room for growth is the same way that hiring personnel is looking at you and saying, will you grow? Can you grow? Can you grow into this position? Because growing up and growing out is two different things. Hello, somebody. So we just gonna call it what it is. So that mobility metric is really really important. Speaking the language is also extremely important. It was something else that you said that I wanted to touch on, and it left my mind. It'll come to me when I watch the episode. Oh man. Oh, asking questions. So I just one of my other girlfriends just recently went on an interview and she came prepared with 20 questions to ask them. Don't be afraid to ask your interviewer questions. Make sure that you're doing the research on the company. Don't just apply for the job because you're looking for a job. Figure out if this is a company that you really want to be a part of, because the same way how these people will look at your social media and terminate you because of your personal views and because you're making disparaging remarks about the company, even if the company is trash, this is the same way you should be assessing, is this a company that I want to be a party to, or am I going to want to make disparaging remarks about the company because the company is trash? So do your research, because depending on who your interviewer is, that interviewer is going to ask you questions to see, well, did they just apply for the job, or did they apply to be a part of what's the word I'm looking for, the organization,
Right.
right? When you're a business major, whether it's business administration or business management, one of the terms that you're going to come across 1,000 times is organizational behavior,
Yep.
right? So with the culture of the organization, right? And culture are that's your habits. Those are the repeated behaviors that are taking place within the organization, right? Within the business, this corporation's culture. Are you a good fit for this place? Do you know what our culture is? Do you know how we do things, how we frame things, how we position things? Are you on board with that? They're going to be doing that research. They're going to ask you questions, and those questions, most of the time, are not going to be clear indicators that that's what they're looking for, but that is what they're going to be looking for.
Right.
It'll be something that alludes to the fact that they're trying to see how much you know about the company. They might not ask you, well, do you know when the company was founded? They might not ask you who founded the company, but they'll ask you certain questions that'll tell them, like, no, this person actually really wants to be here. Like, this was a dream and an aspiration versus this was a job I saw on Indeed and they were paying 75,000 and I can't, 40,000 ain't covering my lifestyle anymore, so I applied for the job.
Right. And I would even add to that, even looking at macro trends and what's going on there. So, and this was a good lesson for me, because when I interviewed for, for Dollar Tree as a sourcing manager, one of the
Mm-hmm.
things that's important is being able to kind of see, how are the markets looking in terms of commodities, because based on that, that determines um, how your manufacturers are looking, um, and also what's going to affect pricing ultimately and the state of that supply chain. So one of the
For the person who doesn't know what macro trends means and who doesn't know what you mean by commodities.
So macro trends are anything that's affecting essentially anybody outside the household, but particularly when we're saying macro, we're typically talking about nations, regional blocks, continents, international organizations like the IMF or International Monetary Fund, World Trade Bank, World Bank, sorry, things like that. And then for what was the other one again? Sorry. Commodities. Sorry. So yeah. So any basic, I would say a good that's instrumental to the world. So oil, wheat, grains, rice, things like that. Something that again trade on an exchange that's not a company or another entity of some sort. So
okay,
that's actually real. Let me say that because technically you have forex, which is futures and currencies, but that's kind of out of scope of the conversation. But the question that my soon-to-be director asked me was, what are some global trends that or an example of a global trend that you're experiencing? And I was not expecting that question at all. And he joked with me later on, but he's like, you took like a solid minute to think about it. And thankfully, I remember way back a few years ago, I was watching, again, like Passion mentioned, we're nerds. So I was watching like on Wired, which those are Wired. That's, very tech focused, like magazine, and they really cover a lot of like ongoing trends, present things going on. I'm sure they're talking a ton about crypto and SBF or Sam Bankman-Fried and all of that going on right now. But at the time, back in 2016, 17, the big trend was the hardware revolution that was going on in Shenzhen, China, and how that was affecting the startup communities, not only in Asia and Europe, but also in the United States, and turning the head on manufacturing. And that was really important because, not to go too far into supply chain, but China, specifically China, but Asia, Southeast Asia, they've really been the main manufacturing hub, low-cost manufacturing hub for a lot of companies, especially in the U.S.
Right.
And so that has been a training advantage for us. But Chinese are very smart. So they're all the reason why the U.S. for the most part has been able to benefit from that is because the U.S. usually designs or invents the product. So you'll see this on your iPhone. It'll usually say made in China, designed in, San Francisco or Cupertino, California. So they have the IP or the intellectual property. And again, Chinese know that. So a lot of these things, you may have been hearing about the chip wars and things like that going on right now. China is reverse engineering, or I'll not get too political, but there is suspicion that there's a lot of reverse engineering going on, as well as incubation of different, electronic and other components as well. And to their point, I mean, it's just an advantage. So that's changing the way that supply chains are working as well. So all that to say that thankfully I gave that answer, and that seemed to be a good answer. But but ever since then, I've looked at the role up and down my my role, the company, and then what's affecting usually that industry in general.
Okay.
because then that gives you an idea of maybe some of the challenges or opportunities that they're currently experiencing. So, which again, if you articulate in the right way or ask certain questions in a way like, hey, I've noticed that, like right now, I've noticed that interest rates are at an all-time high to curb inflation. How, and I noticed that if they're a public company, I noticed that you have X amount of bonds or debt or etc.
Right.
How are you guys approaching this issue? And then two, you can even, depending on the role, say, how will my role help with solving that problem? So,
Okay.
so yeah.
So somebody doesn't work in, they're not on that level. They're on a I don't want to say a lower level because that sounds a little bit like degrading, but they're not what's the how do I want to phrase this? They're not applying for a job for a corporate position.
Okay.
They're applying for a position that's um in the warehouse, in the shop. They're not applying for one of the corporate McDonald's positions, right?
Right.
Maybe they're applying for a position in the store. How how do you frame that for that person? Because there are a lot of people right now, we're always looking to get better pay, but some of us are not well equipped to move up to better pay,
Right.
right? So, two questions. How do they take what you were able to take and answer a question like that? Two, how do they present these questions to the manager, present a similar question to the manager, without intimidating the manager out of saying, no, I don't want this person here because they making me feel stupid. They make me feel like I'm inadequate for the position. How do they do that?
So, and this actually, especially that second question, actually makes another good point from this lovely book. This is again, who gets promoted?
Who's the author of that book?
Donald Asher.
Okay.
So, who gets promoted? And who doesn't, and why? Second edition came out in 2009. Donald Asher. So one of the other things, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but essentially make your boss look good. And so I'll talk about that in the second question. So the first, and this is great because I actually have worked with quite a few clients that have been in warehouses and facilities and stores. So I would say you want to more so, if we're not, we don't just necessarily have to talk about, again, currencies and stocks and all that, but I would talk more so about processes. And this is where you can kind of get a clue looking at the job description, because if you're working in a role where you're going to be part of a, how do I say it? I would say just more so like a workflow or essentially a process. You may want, you can tailor it to say, hey, how will my, if I were to, achieve this role, are there any other things I can do to kind of help with the process or with, and you'll know in your industry. So I've noticed that, cash is missing a lot as let's say you're applying to be a cashier. So, maybe it's supposed to be $200 at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day, and it's like 180 or something. So you can even kind of, again, show that you have some knowledge that's not on that job description sheet and say, hey, how do you guys handle, like you were just talking about shrinkage? How do you guys handle theft? What are, and it doesn't have to always be something negative, but it can be something positive too. Or, I noticed that you guys have done better than the other stores in the area. How are you guys doing that? So, so any way you can really kind of show that, A, you know what you're talking about, but you're not, like, again, making them feel dumb. And, you are concerned about the overall operation and the success of whatever the organization is over that store, that's already going to put you in a better spot because and this happened before too, where they may even say, hey, I know you're applying for this position, but I think you're actually better suited for this position. And 9 times out of 10, it will be a better position, or a position that has a better track, or etc. So really kind of understanding their operation, or what they're doing, their process, some of their pain points, respectfully, of course. Then that's going to help them kind of understand. Again, we're going from, do I even want to hire this person, to, okay, how could this person best help the organization, and in turn, essentially helping yourself in that role. So I guess that's the first one. And then the second, in terms of it was the second one, was that, just to make sure I'm clear, was that ask them questions without making them feel down? Okay. So
right.
So this is where, and you've already mentioned this, but this is where the coachable aspect comes in. So when you're asking questions, you can ask them in a way as if they were your mentor, essentially. So you can say, hey, I've noticed that this is going on here. So let's just say that maybe sales has been down for this store that you're applying to. So I've noticed that clothes are not going out as much. How are you guys addressing some of those challenges, and are there things or skills that I can adopt or learn, or etc., to address that, or how or what is the ideal, like, I wouldn't say what's the person you're looking for, but kind of like in a way ask that question, because then you're kind of given the perception that, okay, this person really wants to learn, this person really wants to understand, and as assuming their supervisor or someone that capacity, that's a learn opportunity. That's an opportunity where again, you're actually now starting to make them look good, because now you can say, okay, well, I taught this person this person's doing X, and I don't know, again, maybe that person, they have their little things that they have to hit, and that makes them look good to their boss, things like that. So I would say, again, things like that, like, I don't know how many of your viewers have read Robert Greene books, but in his book Power, I don't know if it's the first rule, but it's one of the top laws, but it's like, never outshine the master. So that's one where, again, use the opportunity to learn from that person. Let that person talk about the role and other things that they have noticed, and things of that nature, and that will kind of help you navigate some of the challenges. So, and you'll know too, like, because sometimes you may hear what's going on, and you're like, I don't want that. I don't want this job. People forget it's a two-way street. And, if we have time to talk about negotiation, I love to kind of walk through that too, because that's another, unfortunately, perception that it's just like, you have the all, knowing employer, and you have the little employee that's just, and I'm not saying you're not being grateful. Obviously, you need to show gratitude all the time, but it's a two-way street, and they know that.
Right.
So also understand that you also have some leeway too, even if you are just coming off the street, because if they didn't, they wouldn't be putting out this job in the first place.
So I had two questions. One was, because the information you gave just now was really good information for after you're in the door, but prior to, when you're still in the interviewing process, when you're asking questions, because this can become tricky for someone, especially for someone who's they're applying for a job that They know that they might be overqualified for it. They don't necessarily know if there are other positions available that they are qualified for, or they might feel like they're not fully qualified for that position, but they know they can do this one. How do they pose their questions without coming across as condescending or coming across, because I know somebody was telling me that they've been going through different rounds of interviews, right? So the first interview that they'll go on will be, it seems like they're being interviewed by a third party company who really, they don't have any insight, right? So if you're asking me these questions, and these are very canned questions, and now if I threw these questions at you, you probably wouldn't know how to respond to any of them, because right about now I could tell you anything, and whatever I can tell you is going to definitely get me in the door. Do I pose my round of questions to that person knowing that I'm shooting for a target that's very still, I'm very close, and I'm definitely going to knock your head off? Or do I save those questions for the second round of interviews? Or do I curtail the questions so that the interviewer that I'm dealing with right now doesn't feel like I feel like you're trying to make me feel like I'm stupid, and like, wait, what? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, how do they formulate their questions? And yes, we do have time to talk about negotiations. When my head was down, I was making some magic happen over here. So I was definitely paying attention, but I was also making some magic happen. So we have whatever time we need, and I can always chop the episode up and even make the negotiation part of the conversation a bonus footage. So we can take whatever time we need to take.
Perfect. So, and I guess my experience with this has been with recruiters, as terms of third parties, but I also know there's also like temp agencies, and then there's companies that are, like you said, are literally hired to, you know. So I will say this, and I'll give I'm just full disclosure. I think all of my hires, or anytime I've been hired, has been direct. But I have worked with, I have had some of this experience. And I've had the luck to actually work with somebody who actually was a manager of a temp agency that was coming through. So I feel like that's the only reason why I'm even comfortable answering this question. But I would say, so this is kind of where you are going to have to ask some questions, and to what capacity. Like, I would probably like start, kind of the bottom, and then maybe go a little bit up, and you'll kind of get an idea of where the roof is, in terms of their understanding level. But you really are going to have to pay attention to, obviously, what they're saying, how they're saying it. If they're kind of pausing or hesitating, or like, I don't, really know, or from what I understand, like, then you kind of know, like, okay, you're kind of hitting the roof, and then I would change that. Once you kind of hit that, then I would then switch to, what are the next steps, or what are, or if you're curious, which again, they may or may not know, but again, another identifying question is, what are some of the challenges this company is looking for or experiencing, or X, Y, and Z? How does this role pertain to that? And if they can answer that, great. If not, or they're kind of giving you a vague or high level answer, then I would cut to, what are the next steps, or what is there anything else that you would like to know about me, or et cetera? Because you also don't want, time is precious. So you want to give them the information that obviously they need to know, because it is a screening. But you also don't want to, like you said, you don't want to make them feel dumb, or and you don't want to waste your time too, as well. So if they've already identified that this is not it, that, talk about all the time in economics, it's opportunity cost. So maybe that didn't go well, but maybe there's another opportunity that you can, spend your time in preparation for. But yes, I would definitely kind of feel, in terms of like, their knowledge, and again, from my experience, it's usually the job and then that direct hiring manager understanding of the role. So it's going to be limited. So you can even, which I've tried to do before, sometimes successful, sometimes not so successfully, kind of find out what the actual manager or whoever that person is, director is like what they're looking for particularly, because at the end of the day, that's who you would be working for, whether that is as a direct hire, as a temp, as a contract worker, because that's really at the end of the day, that's what's going to matter. So, so small little adaptive questions, and then once you hit the roof of understanding, you'll know next steps. What are what are we going to do? What's the timeline? All those type of things, because at that point, they've kind of made, or if they haven't made a decision right there, they're going to make a decision soon as they round up all the other people that they've screened in that past week. So,
okay, let's talk negotiations.
okay. So, let's say you had a great resume, you got the interview went great, receptionist was talking just wonders about you. Oh, you're so nice and kind, and etc. So professional. Maybe even go through a few other rounds of interviewing, and you get the job. And they make an offer.
Okay.
So I actually have recently done this, but that was kind of a special situation. But never accept the first offer.
Okay.
Never.
Okay.
So I say that because 9 times out of 10, and you just have to think about it from a business perspective, they're going to offer you the lowest possible compensation package, if you're so lucky, but compensation to get you in there.
Right.
So there's usually a range that they're willing to go, and again, you'll when you kind of start this process, you'll kind of know where the upper quartile or upper whatever the roof is. So typically, and again, this past job, and I love the job I'm in right now. So that's part of the reason why I was like, you know what, this is good, this is great. But actually, even before I go into how you respond, salary is not the only thing that you negotiate. So don't just negotiate salary. I made this mistake at Dollar Tree. I negotiated salary and felt like I was winning, and then I got the relocation package. That was a painful relocation.
Oh man, no, this is good right here, Gerrick. You talking real right. Keep telling this story because this is good.
So anything that is on that paper, and I haven't gone to this level, but there's probably even things not on that paper that you can negotiate. But again, I would say I'm a mid-level individual contributor at this point. So again, even my knowledge understanding is still limited. But just give you examples of things you can negotiate. You can negotiate obviously salary. You can negotiate, if you're so lucky, stock options. How you're vested, especially those who are in startup communities or working for small companies. You can you can negotiate PTO. That's a big one, especially if you have a family or if you're trying to, whatever their situation. Sick days, if they still offer it. There's a whole, again, gamut of things. And now, you can even argue or negotiate how you're working. So if you're in a position where you can work remotely, I want a hybrid schedule, or I would want to work fully remote. Do you have those options? X, Y, and Z, blah, blah, blah. So those are all things, again, off the top that you can negotiate. I think there are some things that are a little more hard-coded. I don't think benefits is one that you really can, just because, again, they already have a contract with that insurance agency, so 9 times out of 10, it's already pretty much set in stone. But outside of, again, that, I mean, anything's on the table. I mean, you can even get ridiculous with them and be like, hey, I want a company sponsored car, and I want you to pick me up, from the job to here. And they might be like, no, that's ridiculous. But
Right.
they may come back and say, well, we can do this. So so full disclosure, I don't think my friend would mind me mention this story. So he's had a history of working in different, either research or pharmaceutical companies. Biology major, wicked smart guy, lived like 10 minutes away from him. And he had the opportunity to work, again, through networking, for a startup. And at the time, he was, I think he was like in like making 60 something thousand. And he just put a number out there because he liked the job he was at. So he was like, I want $120,000. And they came back and said, well, we can't do 120, but how does 95 sound?
Because which one of y'all is offended at a $30,000 increase? Because that's somebody's annual salary. So which one of y'all, drop it in the comments, which one of y'all is offended if they only increase your salary $30,000?
And again, that was obviously an extreme example, but again, those things are out there. I've negotiated up to 10K more than what I was originally offered. So it's definitely one of those things where you just never know. And sometimes they really are just like, we only got 5,000, in terms of what we can work with. But others, you have no idea. Like I said, like you said, $30,000. I mean, that changes life, So, so again, all of those things, I would definitely are definitely on the table. So, in terms of approach, so when you get, go ahead.
Wait, let me just throw this in here as well. When you're coming on board, when you're initially being onboarded, if what you're negotiating is not optional, that doesn't mean never. Right now doesn't mean never. So this might not be something that they're willing to discuss, negotiate, review now. However, this might be something that you can revisit in 90 or 180 days. And you'd be surprised how all of a sudden they magically found that other 20,000 that you were asking for. They magically found this car service that you were asking for, that phone, because now you'll be able to have a portfolio of information. I make 97% of my work calls from my personal cell phone. So I don't think it's too much to ask for you to provide me with a phone, because this way, you can, I don't have a problem with you monitoring these texts or these calls, because these are all business related calls. Now you can negotiate that. That's something that you can write off on your taxes. There are levels to this. So don't think that just because it wasn't negotiated up front doesn't mean it can't be negotiated later on. 90 to 180 days, you might be able to get some things moving. So now please continue, sir. Oh, no. I forgot also, before when you were talking about the economics and you were talking about opportunity cost, for those of you who are not familiar with that term, opportunity cost, I feel like I've mentioned it in an episode or two, but if you are not familiar with that term, it's also known as trade-off, right? What are you trading for this, right? So the opportunity cost for me being here in a tank top is that I'm cold. So I might be fashionable, but I'm not comfortable. Right? I traded my comfort for a look. So even though that sounds really basic, that's really what it boils down to. It's what you're trading. One thing you're trading over here for this over here. You might be trading you're getting lesser pay from this job, but this job also allows you to work 15 minutes away from home on foot as opposed to an hour and a half away from home driving. So you're saving on your mileage, you're saving on the maintenance to the car, you're saving on your gas, you're saving on your tolls, etc. You're even saving on your lunch because you can run home on lunch versus all of these other things. So that's what opportunity, cost, and trade-off are. I just didn't want to forget that because I had forgotten it before. Please continue.
Glad you mentioned that. And I don't know, again, just another random tangent, but no, I just love economics in general because, and I'll put this out here too. Let's say that you're not getting the type of pay that you're looking for. There's other, again, depends on the industries. There are other areas that will be willing to do that. So I forgot who said this recently, but this is going all over LinkedIn. But somebody had essentially said, like, you know, water's 50 cents at a grocery store. It's $1 at the, you know, more premium stores, and it's $6 on an airplane. So it all depends on where you're positioned too. So that also plays a big role. So again, just something to keep in mind. Last thing I mentioned before I go into approach 2, this is another big thing. And again, I'm just happy too because I'm blessed because I've had people kind of take me under their wing even when I didn't appreciate it at the time. But something else that you can also discuss as well is bonuses. So sign-on bonus. We just talked about relocation. So one of the little more experienced sourcing managers, she was coming from Ohio when she moved to Chesapeake during that move, and she negotiated apparently a really good relocation deal. So again, that's out there, and then annual bonus as well. So, and I say that to, especially for those who maybe not typically been offered these type of things, still ask those questions because, again, just like Passion just mentioned, these things can be created. These things aren't set in stone. And I would say that's probably the biggest, again, what we just talked about, like suffering is a product of limited knowledge. So if you don't know those things are out there, you can't ask for them. So they may say, hey, you know what? We can add, 5%, incentive bonus for end of year, depending on how well you stock the shelves. You don't know. They could. And now you're the happiest person stocking the shelves,
That's a fact. I mean, they will give you a bonus for you coming to work every day, for not using any of your sick days. And you'll still get paid for your sick days because you're not going to be able to roll them over, but they'll give you, a little bit of who cares? $100 at the end of the year when it's time for everybody to start doing all of this shopping and buying all of this foolishness, that $100 will come in handy. So make use of all of that. Make use and make your voice heard. A lot of us are only making our voices heard when we complain. But if we're lifting up our voices and we're being heard when we have something to offer other than a complaint, a suggestion, a compliment to someone in the company or what have you, these things are going to work in your favor. And another thing, all of these things that you're hearing here, if you are building a business right now, these are things that you should keep in the back of your mind because these are things that your potential employees might be considering. Your potential employees might be in this audience as well saying, well, I was watching the podcast too, and they said that I could come in, I could ask for a bonus. So I don't understand because that ice cream shop over there offers bonuses. So
yep.
Can I get one from you too? So keep that in the back of your mind when you're structuring your business, how you're going to allocate your funds. And if you're going to allocate funds for bonuses, whether they be quarterly or annually or holiday or maybe birthday or what have you, however you're going to structure your payment packages, how you're going to have your employees set up, if you're going to have them as 1099 contract employees or if you're going to have them as W-2 employees, know the difference in that. Know if your particular industry will allow you the opportunity to opt out of being a W-2 employee and to be a 1099 employee, because that can work for you wonderfully in terms of taxes. There are a lot of things that you don't know, and because you don't know, you don't know. Right. But when you find out, you're going to be like, so, yeah, I just wanted to drop that in.
And then lastly, which of course I think just again speaking of genetics and family, but a big proponent as well, and something that I kind of wish I had taken more advantage of at the time, but education. You know, how much do you compensate for if I were to go back to school for X trade? Are there certain things I can go back to school for? Some they just want you to have a bachelor's degree, and you know they're happy to pay X percent. Others, okay, it's got to be in a certain industry. So, you know, again, don't sell yourself short. Those things are on the table. There's one of my friends we just saw in Charlotte. He's an engineer and he's getting his MBA paid for as we speak, as he's taking classes. So again, that's again, it's all on the table. So, but
And there might be stipulations, even if they're offering that education, there might be a stipulation that, like, okay, after you get this, you know, you will have to remain in the company's employ for X amount of time. But don't let that hinder you because you feel like, oh, well, I don't necessarily want to stay after I have this. Now I can go on to the next place, because there's other information you're going to be able to get at the next level within this company. Now that you have this degree, that you'll be able to take the degree and the experience when you go to the next place. Also, nobody want to pay for you to abandon them. Like, so that's why these stipulations are in place. Nobody's trying to pay for you to get all this education on their dime and then jump ship. Like, okay, well, good looking out for the degree, I'm out. That's not a reality. But definitely make use of everything that they're offering, because the next place you go might not be offering those things.
right, and it's not always a guarantee of this happening, but assuming that you do, you know, get your education, even if you don't go, even if you decide not to go through them. So this was kind of a unique situation for me. So I ended up not going through because I already knew I was leaving as soon as I got this degree.
That was the other thing that I was thinking
But you
about.
know, I still told them they still knew I was in college or getting my MBA, and I got it, and I got a 5%, you know, pay increase. Um, so again, those things are you just again you never know. So another thing from this book, real fast, and I promise I'm gonna go into approach. But another thing from this book that's also big is it's not it's not how wonderful you are, it's how many people know that you're wonderful. Um, so
Say that
so
again.
it's not knowing how wonderful you are, it's how many people know or how others know that you're wonderful.
That's good right there, Passionate. Write that down.
Sales and marketing, guys. Sales and marketing. This goes across the field, and of course every entrepreneur knows this, that without sales and marketing they don't have a business. So, but this applies to careers as well. So, and this is not showboating, but this is, hey, I just got X certification, or I want to do X, or I just did this project, or X, Y, and Z. So they know, oh, okay, yeah, he just did that project, and and when they're having those discussions in the rooms that you're not in, those things will come up. It's like, oh, well, have you considered passion? Well, she just finished this project for us, saved us, you know, $10,000. Oh yeah, well we got this management position, we got this district position, so those are things um, you have to also keep in mind too. So, and this is another thing that unfortunately I've experienced with a lot of people where they're doing great work, they're doing phenomenal work. Nobody knows. Nobody knows what they're doing. So as a result, they get passed over, and not in a good way.
And not in a good way. That's a fact.
So
That's a fact. So let's talk
yes.
approach.
Okay. So you get the offer, and then you look at the number, and that's not going to work. So even if it does work, you still should not
it's
gonna
still
work.
not going to work.
Right.
We're not accepting that first offer. No, let's revisit this.
So there's really two ways you can go about it. So the first is you can say, and I actually haven't done this before, but I know it's possible. So
Okay.
you can say, hello, so thank you for the offer. I really appreciate it. But due to X this situation, or given my skill set, and you can go either direction. So given my skill set, education, blah blah blah, this would, I feel as though this is not necessarily enough, or etc. And again, you really have to wordsmith it. But what is there any potential? What room or leeway do you have? And this usually works more, I would say, in the startup community, because they're really creative in terms of what they can offer you. So again, I haven't done this approach, but I know that's possible. And then they can come back, or you can even say, "This, I appreciate this. I would even be willing to take this. However," and this didn't happen, but this was kind of a funny situation. So one of my other friends out in Denver, um, he was contemplating moving to another company, and like a lot of us, he has student loan debt. So he was saying, "Oh, I would love to take this position, but I have X amount of student debt, so I don't know if this is going to be a good fit for us." I think that hiring manager let the CEO know. CEO called him and was like, "If we were to be able to pay half of your student loan debt, would you work for us?" And like I said, they weren't able to figure it out, but just the fact that was even an offer, like a potential.
An
Yeah.
offer, right? That's
Yeah. So you
crazy.
just never know. So I would say, again, if it actually does work for you, but you're just looking to get more, then I would talk about your skill set and things that you bring to the table, and then just basically asking, like, hey, if there's any leeway. If it really doesn't work for you, state why. Be honest. Hey, I have a family I have to move. I have XYZ, blah blah blah, and you never know what they could do. So that's I would say the open-ended approach. Closed-ended approach is typically where I usually go. Is I'll do my research and say, okay, this job pays between X and X, depending on skill level. And so maybe my target is to make 5 or 10 or 15 more. So what I'll do is I'll say, let's just say that I want to get 10,000 more than what I'm currently making.
Wait, repeat that, because the connection broke up a little bit.
Let's just say that I want to make 10,000. I want to get 10,000 more than what I'm being currently offered. So
Okay.
what I typically like to do is I'll usually go 5 or 10,000 more than whatever my target is, and they know it's a game. So if I say, okay, let's say I'm making 50,000 and I want to make 60, I may say, due to X, my skills, etc., education, blah blah blah, experiences, I feel as though 70,000 would be more fair. And then you put that back to them. 9 times out of 10, they're probably going to be like, okay, he wants 60,000, and they'll say, okay, would this work? Or what they may do is they may say, well, we can't offer that. That's too much, blah, 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 labor, all that costs. We can offer 55. And, and then you can kind of basically, either accept the offer or repeat the process. And even when you accept that portion, you could also, which I would honestly, to not be annoying, I would list all the things you're looking for at once, and then you can kind of like articulate. Right. So maybe you don't get the 60, you get the 55, but they can offer you all the days in the world. So now you got 3 weeks PTO,
right.
So so again, I would articulate that way. But yeah, it's a back and forth. And it's actually helpful because as you're having these interactions back and forth, you're learning more and more about what, not only what they can do and can't do, but just what it kind of gives you insight too on their culture and and how they're looking at you. So if they highly value you, 9 times out of 10, they are going to probably try to make that work. You know, versus if you're just like another person they're just hiring or whatever, they may be, you know, pushing back on you more and giving you a harder time. So that also kind of gives you an idea too of like, oh dang, they're not giving me anything. You know, do I really want this? And sometimes you just gotta take it, you know, and that's reality, that's life. But then you know, okay, you can either do like just Passion to mention where, all right, well, let's have a 90-day review and let's let this be one of the topics based on my performance. You know, let's raise it up, etc. Or you know that, hey, you take the job, but you're already kind of looking for that next one. So again, but yeah, so that's my. There's a whole bunch of things. I highly suggest the book, Never Split the Difference. I actually do forget that author, but yeah, I highly recommend that book because there's different techniques and things that you can kind of navigate and work through. And yeah, I'll just say it works. So
I'm looking up the author. Oh, apparently this must be something that's searched regularly because that came up immediately as soon as I typed "never split." So this is "Never Split the Difference" by Negotiating as If Your Life Depended on It by Chris Voss.
Yep.
Correct? This is, let me make sure I'm not showing you something y'all ain't supposed to see.
That's it.
This is what it looks like.
Okay. Yeah, and I had the physical. Yeah. So
yeah,
that's the one.
Yeah, I like a book. I like a hardcover, a soft cover. I like to turn a page. There's something about that. It works for me so much better than online reading. But anyway, that's me being a nerd. We have covered, I think, literally everything. I feel like we've covered everything from showing up, looking the part, from how we should formulate our resumes, how we should present ourselves inside. Here's a question in your negotiation. So they give you the offer. How long of a window should you give them before you respond? Or how long of a window should you give them to say, like, okay, you know, or do you say I'm courting other offers at this time? I give me a week and I'll get back to you. Do you say, well, you know, this really isn't it, and you know, you got 72 hours to respond? Like, how are we presenting that in the negotiation process?
So a lot of times, I guess it really depends on the company, but a lot of times they'll usually give you, you know, a certain window. So let's just say 72 hours. You have 72 hours to respond. You could say, for example, and again, you kind of know what your opportunities, your situation is. So you can kind of get a little creative, but also, you know, be careful, don't burn yourself in the process. If you know that there is a potential for another offer, or if you're just happy at the job that you're at right now, you could, for example, say, you know, let's say just, you know, we're arguing or negotiating salary. So, you know, I'm at this point in time, I'm, you know, currently looking at other, you know, other organizations, or I'm actually waiting to hear back, because that's usually what actually happens. I'm waiting to hear back from another, and I would need a week to make this decision. And if they really want you, they'll reach out to you right away, or within a very short time to try to convince you otherwise. If not, and not saying that this always means that they don't, but they may come back and say, okay, well, if we, do this and would this help with the situation, or they might give you the week. It might say, okay, we really don't need anybody until next month, but you have a week to make the decision. Or again, they may just call you and reach out to you and say, hey, what's going on here, and then that's when you can really kind of walk through, like, okay, well, I'm actually looking for X, or I'm actually looking for Y, and then they can tell you, well, yeah, we really can't do that, but we can do X, and etc. It's a conversation, and I think that's again, having that mindset and that shift to, okay, this is law versus to, okay, this is a back and forth, and then we come to an agreement, because anytime there's a contract, so there's always room for movement, and it's on both parties. I think it was, I don't know if it was John Locke, or it was one of the early philosophers from the 1700s, but they talk about the social contract, and that's between the governed and the governors, the president, whoever. So again, not to make things political, but just understand that you do have say, and you do have power. It may not be as much as you would hope, but you do still have some, so you need to utilize that to as much as your advantage as possible.
If you could leave the Passionates with 3 to 5 major takeaways from today, what would they be?
So the first and foremost is, I would say, be adaptable. So being a learner. So another book, which is I'm not able to see it, but it's called Ultra Learning. How to outsmart the competition, or master hard skills, outsmart the competition, accelerate your career. And it's by Scott.
Can you bring it a little closer to the camera? Okay. Ultra Learning. Scott H. Young. Okay.
So be adaptable. This is going to be your most important skill in life, in my opinion. Because, as we talked about earlier in this podcast, the landscape is always moving. So if you're not able to move or adapt with it or supersede it, you will be left behind. It's just facts. Second, when you're actually in the job, do the job well and master it. So another book that I really like is called Peak.
Peak: Secrets from the New Science of Expertise by Anders, was
it
Emerson?
Erickson.
Yeah. Okay. With Robert, does that say Robert Poole or Poole?
Poole, like a pool. P-O.
Okay.
So, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the profession that you're in, but whatever field or skills, and that's the other thing too. In the world we're in now, not to get too broad and hyperbole here, but we really have moved from the Industrial Revolution of the late 1800s, early 1900s to more of, again, an information society. So being able to use and convert your skills into something that is going to be valuable for others, not only now but in the future, that's what's going to give you an edge. So yes, you want to be able to do the job, but are you able to do the job, another job 3 steps ahead? And what are the things that you're doing to get there? Because, and if you can, I would say get a mentor, but that's, again, also a dwindling resource, unfortunately. But career planning is really important, because if you're able to look ahead and say, okay, I'm not here now, it might take 3 years, it might take 5 years, but I'm going to work towards being a director or high skill programmer, or whatever the case may be. You kind of can work backwards to then get there. Or if it's another field altogether. So obviously we're on a podcast. You need to do freelancing. If you want to do, I mean, there's tons of things now. The internet has mildly expanded the potential of different fields that you can, you know, earn your coins. So developing those skills, that's going to help you get there, and opening up to opportunities that maybe you not even have imagined, you know. So so mastery, I would say, is definitely, so like I said, doing the job well, being really productive in that job. So this is kind of controversial, but this is one that's really important. It's more important to be productive than to be hardworking. This is my opinion. I say that because there are many people who work really hard, and are working all the hours. But if someone else can come in there and do that job in half the time, that's the person they want. That's the person that's going to move forward. So learn those skills. And I know we just flashed a whole bunch of books up there, but there's courses, there's anything, like all those things. I promise you. And sometimes I'll be sitting in a meeting or doing a presentation, and I'm like, man, I really wish I had taken the time to learn that skill, because now something that could have taken me an hour is now going to take me 2 days easily, and I'm still getting paid the same.
Right.
So,
Right.
and then last but least, I would say, don't be afraid to be a leader, to take charge.
Okay.
I consider myself a reluctant leader.
Okay.
And I think that the downside from a lot of that was, there have been many times where I was handed opportunities, but I didn't take the call. And looking back, I regret that, because I saw those who did take the call, and I saw how that propelled them, and not necessarily in the same company, but how that propelled them into other avenues. So don't be afraid to be a leader. There's tons of books on this. You don't have to, leader does not have to be in your title, your name. People know who the leaders are in the organization. They know. So they're coming to you, and a lot of times it's a test. If they're coming to you with an opportunity or a project, especially if you're starting out, I would take it, because it's gonna expose you to a lot of different people, a lot of different fields, a lot of different avenues, and maybe even doors that you didn't even know were possible. So.
Did I give y'all enough? I mean, I told you last week that it is so critical for you to show up for yourself. And this week, I wanted to make sure that you had more than enough, especially with something as critical as your income, more than enough to show up for yourself correctly, so that you have the best opportunity at the best possible position, at the best possible income. Now, personally, I feel like y'all got game on game on game on game on game. But if you feel like we missed anything, feel free to drop that in the comments. Questions, comments, criticisms, commendations, critiques. They are all welcome. They will all be responded to. If you would like to send a listener letter, you can send it to my brilliant friend Passion at gmail.com. I will get back to you as soon as I can. I told you I have 1,000 things going on, but that doesn't stop me. I'm still at it at all times. There are a couple other housekeeping things that I'll probably just drop in the description box. If you would like to be a financial contributor, you can make your donations via Cash App, Podbean, Zelle, Linktree, or PayPal. I remembered all of them. Passion in the building. So, okay, that's how you can make your financial contributions. They all go back into the pod. Gerrick, I want to thank you so much for spending this time. We went way over the time that we initially thought that we were going to spend. So I want to thank you so much for spending this time with us and for just imparting so much wisdom so freely. It is greatly appreciated. I am sure that at least one of the Passionists is going to be able to take some notes from this, apply, and if they execute the way they should, they'll be able to come back with a praise report, and we are looking forward to that, wouldn't you say?
Of course, and thank you for all that you've been doing. I mean, this is amazing. So you were uplifting minds and hearts and bodies. It's great. It's a beautiful thing.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That is my goal. I just want to be able to pour into the people, give them a perspective that they may not have considered so that they can think a little bit wider, right? So I really feel like that's it. I feel like I got you right? So this is your Get You Right Guru signing off. Y'all go forth. Be great. Be filled with bliss. Be armed and empowered with knowledge. You got the information. Do some additional research if you need to. None of the books that Gerrick has presented today are books that Gerrick wrote. So he has a bunch of articles on LinkedIn. You can definitely check him out. You can check out any of the books that he listed. That will serve you well. You can do your own additional research. There's research out there. You're already here on YouTube. Put in any number of things in the search box and you'll find that there are thousands of videos already available for it. Apply the information that you're getting. Execute on the information that you've gotten. Once you execute, you are guaranteed to see some kind of results. Give us a praise report. We'd love to hear it. In all things, be passionate. See you later.